Hey, and welcome to this week's edition of the Life and Legacy Show, sponsored by the Sechler Law Firm, where great families make great estate plans. My name is Tim Sechler. I am your host here on the Life and Legacy Show, and I am also a certified elder law attorney and the owner of the Sechler Law Firm in Cranberry Township. I do this show. If you're new to the show, you just found it, maybe somebody referred you over. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We spend some time each and every Saturday morning here talking about legacy planning, asset protection, elder law, how to protect your stuff for your family. The thing that drives me the most in life is that I don't think people work 40, 50 years to accumulate some stuff just to lose it to some broken government rule book that requires you to pay too much in taxes or go broke in a nursing home. This system is failing our seniors, and you need to take some steps to protect yourself. And the reason for the radio show is I want to give you some education on how best to protect yourself from these issues. Things like how do I not go broke in a nursing home, but you can't do these things without an estate plan. So estate planning, if you think about estate planning, estate planning at its core is writing your own rule book for how things should go when you lose control. Okay. Whether you lose control to being sick, whether you lose control to passing away, you can just have your own rule book on how these things are supposed to go. What happens to your finances? Who gets your money? How do you transfer your morals and values to the next generations, right? You can plan for all of this if you take the time to do it. If you don't take the time to plan, well, the state of Pennsylvania has to have a rule book too, right? Because they can't just have this be anarchy in the streets, and so they have to have a rule book. It's called the fiduciary code or the trust code or any number of different pieces of law that answer the question, what happens if I lose control? What happens if I get sick? Well, that might mean guardianship, right? So what happens if I pass away? The state has a rule book, but the number one rule in the state's rule book is you get to write your own rule book. You can look at what they wrote and decide if it's for you or not. And if it's not for you, you're allowed to write your own rule book. It's just a lot of people fail to take the time to actually do that. So that's what we're going to talk about, failing to take the time to get to do that. I need to do my little disclaimer here. This show is not legal advice. I am a lawyer. I would love to be your lawyer, but I'm not yet your lawyer. If you'd like to work with us, you need to reach out to us. Go to sechlerlawfirm.com, Secler lawfirm.com, or give us a call at 724-841-1393, and we can hook you up with a fantastic plan. But don't make any decisions based on what you hear on this or any other radio show. We do this for your education. This is not legal advice. Okay, now with all the disclaimers out of the way, the topic of this week's show is how to talk to family members about this. All right, so I probably get asked this question on a weekly basis. Is I've been talking to my mom about doing estate planning. She just won't do it. I've been talking to my aunt about it. I think my neighbor is going to name me as an executor, but they need to communicate about what they want, etc. Right? So, how do you start a conversation with a loved one about estate planning? And we're doing this show on this topic right now because the holiday season's coming up this weekend, or this coming week is Thanksgiving. Typically Thanksgiving and on into the Christmas season, we spend lots of time with our friends and family. And during this time period, there's some questions sometimes. We're usually somebody will reach out, like the adult children of a senior, and say, I noticed that my mom maybe wasn't there the same way that she was last Christmas, or we haven't spent this kind of time together. She stayed with us for the weekend, and I noticed some things that were concerning, right? And so we young or the adult children of the potential client reach out to us this time of year fairly commonly to ask this question. I don't think my mom has done an estate plan. How do I begin the conversation with my mom to do an estate plan that doesn't sound like I'm just trying to get her money? I want to have a conversation. I want to make sure she has a good plan. Whether or not she leaves me any money or not, I just want to make sure that she has a plan, right? And what is the adult child really saying? I don't want it to be a mess. Maybe I'm involved, maybe I'm not involved. That's up to mom. But if I'm involved, I don't want it to be a mess. And so, what I want to talk about on this week's episode is what would that mess look like? What happens if you don't write your own rule book? What happens if you don't have a plan at all? And then, how you, as a caregiver or a loved one of someone who needs to do a plan, how can you start that conversation? Because people don't like talking about this. People don't like to talk about their own demise. People don't like to talk about their own potential to become disabled. This isn't fun subject matter, but it's necessary to talk about. So how do we have that conversation? How do we start the conversation? So one, let's first talk about what happens if a person doesn't have an estate plan. So if a person doesn't have an estate plan, they pass away. Let's say that they own some stuff, and presumably we want the stuff to get to our family members, but we need to designate who's in control and who gets it. So I give you an example. I was recently asked a question by an adult child whose mother is in a second marriage. She has a stepdad, and the person asking me this question is in her 50s. Mom is in her late 70s, and stepdad similar, but the question is, look, I don't think they've planned. So if my mom dies before my stepdad, then am I out? Well, how does this whole thing shake out? And so this is a pretty common question. And you can't blame the person who asked me this question for wanting to know how's this all going to work out. Okay, I might inherit a couple hundred grand. I might not. Maybe my mom wants me to inherit the money. Maybe she doesn't. I just want to know, am I in? Am I out? What's going to happen here? And if she doesn't do any planning, because I suspect my mom just may never want to deal with this issue at all, is there a situation where my dad, who left it to my mom, now my mom's remarried, is there a situation where everything that my dad worked for is going to go to stepdad's kids? And the answer to the question is, yeah, there are circumstances that could happen, right? So with a married couple, there's no defaults, right? So everybody just thinks that if I pass away, everything is going to my spouse. But that's not necessarily the way that it goes. Okay. So the way that the law works, everything will go to my spouse. Unless I have kids. If I have kids, now the law defaults to my kids get a share. And the share depends on a relationship and some different things, but not everything goes to the spouse. But a lot of married couples own their assets jointly. Well, generally speaking, joint assets carry with it survivorship rights. So a joint house in a married situation, typically one spouse passes away, the other spouse owns it. So what this one client was asking me in particular is my mom and my stepdad have been together a long time. They bought a house together, and it's a jointly owned house. If my mom dies first, who gets the house? And the answer is, well, her husband is going to get the house because it's a jointly owned asset. And then the follow-up question is, okay, what happens when he passes away later? Well, without a proper estate plan, his assets are going to likely go to his kids, your step siblings, and so there's potential that you're not going to receive an inheritance. And so then obviously it's like, well, how do I bring this up with my mom? I don't actually think that's what she wants. It's just I don't know that she's taken the time to think about all this. And so how do I start this conversation with a mom that doesn't make me look like I'm just a greedy kid? But I think I know what my mom would want. My mom would probably want to take care of me and my other siblings, her kids. She probably also wants to take care of her husband, my stepdad, and that's fine too. I'm not saying that she can't. I just want mom to tell somebody what she wants, right? I just had this conversation the other day. I just want my mom to tell someone what she wants. Okay. But see, people aren't sitting around talking about this. If you're listening to this radio show, what do you think the population of the people that are within listening territory of this radio show are actually listening right now? Like, I wish it was a high percentage. I wish I was getting 50% of the target demographic listening to my radio show, but that's not happening, right? Most people aren't thinking about this or considering this. And so, how do we get people who aren't thinking about this stuff to start thinking about it, in particular with the holidays coming up? With the holidays coming up, there's a high likelihood that these conversations, like this is a great time to have these conversations because usually during the holidays, whether it's at Thanksgiving or Christmas or just a visit in between, there's usually some reminiscing over family members, okay, over long gone family members. I remember I was hanging out with my own dad this weekend in on piece of ground that the family owns, and he was telling me his memory of this particular piece of ground when his father was there and what his father used to say about it, right? And so here we are talking about a couple of different generations, and there's a wonderful opportunity when conversation comes up like this, to get into estate planning. So I want to start this by saying this. I want everybody on this radio show, yourself, if you're considering doing an estate plan, or if you're thinking about trying to convince a loved one to add some clarity to their life with an estate plan, the thing that people want, and a lot of people don't say this, but the thing that people want at the end of the day is peace of mind, right? The clients will call our office and they'll say, I want a will or a trust. That's the tool that they're trying to use to achieve the thing they actually want, which is peace of mind. It's like when people buy a car. People don't buy a car because they want a car. People buy a car for one of two reasons. One, I need to get from point A to point B. But, there's other ways to do that. You can do that with Uber. You could do that on a bicycle, right? The reason people will buy a particular type of car is because what it says about them from a social status standpoint. I mean, you get this, right? The reason that somebody buys one car over another car is because of it's a way to express yourself. But there's an underlying thing. They're not buying. Nobody buys $100,000 vehicle to get from point A to point B. It's a status symbol, right? We understand. Okay, so often when people are doing are considering a buying decision, it's not about what the thing is, it's about what the thing provides. And in estate planning, the thing that it provides is peace of mind knowing that I have a plan. Okay, peace of mind knowing that if I get sick, we've thought this through. When I pass away, it's not going to be a total mess. Okay, so the thing that we're all seeking, especially in our retirement years, is a little peace of mind because I know things can go sideways quick in my later years. And I want to just make sure that my family member's okay. All right. So I'm saying that to frame the rest of this conversation because if you start the conversation with your adult parent or other family member who needs to do some estate planning with, do you want a will? The answer is always no, right? The answer, no one wants a will. No one wants to do a trust. If you ask the question, have you ever done a trust? Or have you thought about it? The answer is no, because they haven't thought about it. They're not thinking about the solution like that. And so you can't just say you need to go get a will, because if you say to your family member, you need to go get a will, they're going to think you're all about the money because people equate the word will with the money, right? And that's not actually what you're trying to do here. What you're trying to do is make sure that mom's or dad's wishes are carried out. Okay. So just understand that key distinction. Now, how do we help them understand the thing that they're not saying for themselves, that they want peace of mind? Well, there's a couple different things. One, I want to also just plant here for this conversation that between Thanksgiving and Christmas, this happens a lot. Like we get pretty busy between Thanksgiving and Christmas, and so we threw a couple of extra estate planning workshops on the calendar between uh, Thanksgiving and Christmas, so that you can come in with your family member and get the education you need to start the process. Okay, so let's get back to this conversation. Remembering that estate planning is really all about achieving peace of mind. That's what it's about. Then you should have a conversation around peace of mind. So we put together a checklist. If you'd like to have this checklist, if you email info@sechlerlawfirm.com and just in the subject line, write the word checklist, then I'll know that this is the checklist you're actually seeking. Okay, so go to info@sechlerlawfirm.com and write the word checklist in the subject line, and we'll get you a checklist. But we came up with a checklist that I think would be helpful for people to have conversations with their loved ones. And at the end of the day, they're peace of mind questions. Okay, so let me just pick a couple off the shelf and explain what I'm really asking here. All right, so estate planning is all about control and access. Okay. Who's the decision makers and who's getting the stuff? Control and access. Okay. So a couple of questions off of here that you could have is, Mom, when was the last time you checked your retirement account beneficiaries? Okay. Because you know that those things change over time. That who, if a family member that you named on there has passed away, then perhaps we don't have the proper names on there right now. Um, do you currently know who would receive an inheritance from you? A lot of times people say, "Oh, it's all going to you kids." Well, is it? Is there a stepdad in place? Or everything's going to my spouse? Is it? Because that's not always the way that it works. Um, there's another question here. Oh, do you want to lose all your money to taxes? Right? Of course, the answer to that is no. Did you know that, do you want to lose all of your money to a nursing home? Of course, the answer to that question is no. But you can't just come out and ask those questions. Okay, we got to get to those questions. But the way I would coach you to have this conversation with your loved one is with a story, right? So you start with a story, you start with a conversation, and the conversation goes like this. I was reading an article. I was talking to my neighbor. I was talking to someone at work. You're having a conversation or you're consuming a piece of information about the thing that you want to point out. Mom, I was having a conversation with somebody at work, and her mom has dementia, and they're trying to understand care options, and they're trying to understand how they're going to get the government to pay for the care, or how they are allowed to keep the house for dad. And it's also very confusing. Do you and dad have a plan for that? Right. So if you start a conversation with a thing that you're witnessing or experiencing in your own life, because you don't have to look too hard. You don't have to look too hard to find somebody at work or in your community that has a loved one in a nursing home. It's happening everywhere, right? And so if you start with a conversation that causes a little bit of a lack in peace of mind, then it allows the opportunity to ask the specific question, do you have a plan? And when they say no to that, um, you know, then the follow-up question is, don't you think that we should probably have a conversation about that? There's another related thing to the peace of mind that that I would encourage you to consider as you're trying to think through how to have these conversations, and it's reputation. All right, so let me expand on this a little bit. Whether we all admit it or not, we all care about our reputation. We want to we want others to think kindly of us, right? I mean, look at social media. Social media, the entire reason Facebook exists or Instagram or TikTok or anything. So the entire reason these things exist is because people are looking for validation. They're looking for people to give them likes. They're looking for approval. They're looking to improve their reputation, right? That's the reason social media exists. And as soon as social media became popular in the last 20 years, of course, there's lots of people on there seeking the validation that they want, seeking to improve their status, improve their reputation. Everyone, my point here is everyone cares about their own reputation. Okay. All right. Well, how is reputation managed after you pass away, right? I have a story that I share. This is about my own grandfather. My grandfather had done pretty well from himself from most outsider financial perspective. Like most people to look at the situation would say he had done well. He owned a business or two. He was a farmer. He had ground. He had raised six kids. They're all out of the house doing their own thing. And then my grandfather ends up in a nursing home. And the reason that I do what I do is because my own grandfather went through the nursing home, and went through a pile of money, and no lawyers or nobody that knew anything about this game was trying to help them win the game. And so they just, my family just lost money that they didn't have to lose. And it breaks your heart because people don't work 50, 60 years to lose their stuff to some broken government rule book. At the end of the day, that's what this is. That our seniors shouldn't be going broke in nursing homes. We can do better than that. If you look at all the ways we spend money, we can do better than having our seniors go broke in nursing homes. But anyway, nobody's trying to fix it, and so that's what happened in our own family. And financial loss and what that meant for the family is bad enough, but reputational loss that comes from a thing like that. I want to share you a subsequent experience. So we have an office in my grandfather's hometown. And I was out there. My grandfather was a bit of a character, and people knew who he was in the community. And one day I was out there, and I was doing an estate plan for a person who considered themselves to be a former friend or at least associate with my grandfather. They had had some business dealings together. And the guy said, he said my grandfather's name. Is this your grandfather? I said, yeah, it is, and how did you know him and all those? And he talked a little bit about, the fact that my grandfather had been in World War II in the Navy and the farm and the whole thing. And then he said, what a shame how it worked out, right? What a shame. Now this nursing home story, my grandfather ending up in a nursing home with Alzheimer's disease, is the final chapter of his story, right? I mean, it's part of it, right? So my grandfather did great things, raising the kids, farming, feeding families, starting businesses, earning some net worth to try to pass it on to his family. He did great things during his life, but unfortunately, they didn't have the plan that they needed. The attorneys that they worked with did not provide the family with the estate plan they needed. And now we get to a situation that, despite all the great things that he did in the generations before him that resulted in the farm and all of these things, despite all of this happening, I run into somebody who knew him while he was alive. And the thing that the person says is, what a shame the way that it worked out, right? So here, an estate planning failure, which was failure to plan for, in my grandfather's case, failure to plan to protect assets from long term care expenses. an estate planning failure has now impacted his reputation with people. And it just breaks my heart because that's not how he wanted to be remembered. Now, he's not a guy who would say, I would like to be remembered in this certain way, but our reputation matters to all of us. Okay. And so bringing it back to context of the show, when you're having a conversation with your loved ones about why they need to do an estate plan, I think that if we anchor it to reputation rather than legal documents or money, if we just talk about how they're going to be remembered, I think this is a good starting point. Okay, so share my grandfather's story if it's happy, if it's happy, if it works for you. Um, or share an experience that you've had with someone else. We all know someone who's out there complaining that their loved one made them go through probate, right? So probate is 16 months in the courthouse and essentially giving a family member an unpaid part-time job for a year and a half, right? That's what probate is. And it could be avoided. It could be a lot easier if we don't go through probate. And so maybe sharing the experience of a loved one or a colleague or a friend or family member that you know going through the probate process and how much of a time suck that it is, and how that person going through the probate wishes that their parent would have done better estate planning so they didn't have a 16-month unpaid job, right? Because there's a couple of different things that are going on here. One, it's how do you want to be remembered? Two, it's peace of mind. And so the notion that if when I pass away, I'm going to give a family member work to do, and if I don't have my stuff together, it's going to be a lot more work because it's unorganized because our kids don't know where our money is, right? So if I pass away, my kid's going to be my executor. My kid doesn't know how many accounts I have at which bank. They don't know all of my financial interests. They don't know that stuff. And so now you just created them a job where they got to be a detective to find this stuff out, right? And and not only did they have a part-time job for a year and a half that's unpaid, they also start to develop bad feelings about mom and dad about putting them through this. Why couldn't have my mom and dad just took an hour of their time and gone to a lawyer to get a proper estate plan? Why didn't they just do it? It would have saved me so much time and energy, right? That's the experience that a lot of people have. And so by sharing the perspective that I that you have, right? So my advice to you in trying to start this conversation through the holidays is share a story about an estate plan gone wrong. Share a story about how it impacted negatively the person's reputation with their family, because it's true. I'm not asking you to make anything up. This is just the way that it goes. I wish my dad would have had a better plan, is a thing I hear all the time. Okay. I wish my dad would have had a better plan, because when you share with them that you had an experience where someone said, even if you just heard it on a radio show, I wish my dad would have had a bigger plan. Now, what's happening with your parent is okay. So now we're getting to reputation. And the other thing that people will say to me is, I don't want to be a burden on my kids, right? That all takes away from peace of mind. If I can make it easy on my kids, I will make it easy on my kids. And so share a story of an estate plan gone wrong. Share a story about how it became a pain in the neck for the kids. This estate plan became a burden. Share how it's now impacting the way that the executor thinks about their parent. I wish he would have just had a better plan. Okay. Because that's going to be the thing that actually moves them. Just talking about death and dying and do you have a will, that's not going to get it done. Right. But talking about the experience that the family members have when someone passes away without an estate plan in the chaos that it can cause, that's a way to have a conversation starter. And so now that you've got the conversation started and you say, Mom or Dad, do you have a plan? Right. And their answer is probably no, because most people don't have a plan, or the people that do have a plan, it's the will from when the kids were little, right? Um, and then you just simply make the point. I think we ought to learn our options. And the way you learn your options, at least around here, my opinion is our estate planning and asset protection workshop is the best thing going. It's called the Three Secrets to Protect Your Legacy. And you come into the workshop and we're going to teach you about legal tools, wills and trusts. And we keep it light. We tell some jokes, we have some fun, but you're gonna start to learn about the legal technical things you need to do to get your affairs in order. It's a low pressure thing. It is not a paid consultation. This is a free workshop, so it's sort of a low barrier to bring your family member to. So you bring your family member to the workshop, And then they get a feel for us, and they get a feel for whether they want to do the plan or not. And so that's the best way I know how to tell you when you're talking with your family members over the holidays. That would be my way to get through to them. So I hope that this was helpful. Man, if this just one family hears this radio show and they have a good conversation over the holidays that results in a little bit of peace of mind, that'd be enough of a Christmas present for me. So I hope this was a good radio show for you. I hope you enjoy Thanksgiving with your family. Remember, don't make any legal decisions based on what you hear on this or any other radio show. If you need legal advice, you need a lawyer. We're available anytime at SechlerLawFirm.com. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you soon.